No worries. Okay, so where are we working? So the Cederberg, many of you have been there. Calvin and Stanley joined us in July, joined eCRAG for a week, and we went to the Cederberg. So those of you who don't know where the Cederberg is, it's about 3 hours drive north of Cape Town, and it's part of the Cape Fold Belt Mountains, and it extends up to about Van Reinsdorp in the north, down to the SAHRIS area in the south, and there are different sub-regions within that part of the Cape Fold Belt Mountains. Research has been going on. I'm just struggling to move on here. Let's see. There we go. Great. Research in that area has been ongoing since the 1940s. There were earlier surveys, even via the letters that were sent to the magistrates, asking them if they knew about any rock paintings, and those were the first recordings in the area. But from the late 1940s, Heimer Binowitz, Ginger Townie Johnson, Percy Seif started going out to the Cederberg after the war. They were friends that met during the war, and they heard about a site that was being damaged, or people were allegedly trying to chop out the rock paintings in a site near Citrusdal. So they went out to see what was going on and fell in love with rock paintings from that point onwards. And they recorded sites for about 20 years after that and accumulated about 500 site recordings over a 20-year period. After their group, which is very much an amateur group of non-archaeologists, they were joined by Juliette Deacon. Actually went in the 60s. One memory of Heim and Ginger was they were always trying to get them to skinny dip with them in the rock pools on a Sunday morning. So there was a lot of fun going on during the early outings. But later on, it became a bit more formalized when Tim Maggs joined their group, and they became very, very close friends. And Tim had a 4x4, so that was the big breakthrough. They now had a vehicle they could drive around in the Cederberg and access places they couldn't before. And then later, John Parkinson, it's pity he's not here anymore at the conference, but John arrived in South Africa and asked Heim and Ginger, what sites do you know about? Where can I find sites to dig? And he was interested in his seasonal mobility hypothesis at the time. And they took him to De Hongen, Elandsbay Cave, Dipkloof, and those were sites they had already recorded as part of their rock art surveys. John then started the Spatial Archaeology Research Unit at UCT, and Royden Yates, Tony Manai, Bill van Reysen, there were many great students of John's that then extended the surveys and have carried on their work. UCT, between about 1970 and 2000, recorded about 1,500 sites in their archive, and that brought the total number of sites recorded to about 2,000. Jeanette, as I say, was instrumental in starting eCRAG in 2007. She had also been involved for many, many years working in the Cederberg. Her focus, besides recording sites, was to clean graffiti at sites. So she was very interested in the heritage management aspects of rock art sites. And when the National Monuments Council was running between the 60s and the late 1990s, she had her crack team, or A team, that she used to take to sites, and they would clean graffiti. And she had detailed recordings at all the sites, countrywide, really, but a lot of them were in the Cederberg that they worked on. So there's a long history prior to eCRAG of, standing on the shoulders of giants that eCRAG benefited from, an expansive network of landowners, contacts and networks, which facilitated eCRAG's entry into this space. I don't think it would have been possible for eCRAG just to have sprung up and achieved what it has achieved without the guidance and the backing of those great people. I also want to mention Siaka's work at Bushman's Kloof. All of those records were digitized. So I did the donkey work for my master's thesis, which was to digitize everybody's work in that region. So there were about 5,400 sites. As I say, 2,000 of those were rock art sites, and the rest were shell middens, open site artifact scatters, etc. Before we started moving into eCRAG. I joined eCRAG in 2008. Simon Hall saw that I was doing my master's and I was interested in databases, and he said, quite cleverly, why don't you join eCRAG and help them with the database? And I became the data guy. So I then went out on all the surveys and added all the eCRAG survey work to my thesis, which came out in 2011. So I was sort of hooked in and have never left, for good or bad. So these are the areas of the region that I'm talking about, and they're sub areas: the Sandveld, the Swartruggens, the Cederberg core area. So some people are quite fussy about what is the Cederberg. It's not really this huge area. It's a much smaller area. But colloquially, people refer to the Cederberg as including most of these regions in color here. The Piketberg is another area as well, further there. So eCRAG, primarily Eastern Cederberg Rock Art Group, has been focused on the eastern side of that area, which was largely a gap. So when we started surveying, there was very little work done in that area, and we knew very little work had been done in that area because all the records have been digitized. So when we go out, we know exactly what's been done and what hasn't been done in the area because of the hard work of digitizing all of that has been done. So this is what it looks like on a map after 18 years of surveying with eCRAG. We have the red dots representing sites that had been recorded previously. Heim, UCT, many others contributed to that archive of those red dots. And the yellow dots is what eCRAG has added over the last 18 years. Those are not all archaeological sites in the area. I've just excluded non-rock art sites from this map. So I've mentioned eCRAG's objectives. As I say, it's a citizen science initiative. It's supposed to be something that anybody can do. Anybody can join eCRAG and participate with us. It's not meant to be a highly technical, university-led or researcher-only led initiative. It's supposed to be something that has longevity, that will be here in 20 years or 40 years, and it's supposed to keep the costs and the entry level or as low as possible. So we try to keep thinking about that throughout the years of eCRAG, and so we've never actually approached anyone for funding. So we thought, well, as soon as you have funding, it means you've got all the administration, the reporting, all of this justification of what you're doing with the money. So eCRAG has always been self-funded. We pay for our own petrol, we pay for our own accommodation. We don't actually go out and get donor funds, with an asterisk. I'll get to why there's a small exception to that in the last couple of years. So it's a volunteer program, and so it's largely the members of eCRAG are not archaeologists. So we're constantly having to bridge, as the archaeologists, bridge these worlds where people are just joining, they're excited. What is all this rock art about? Why is it important? Why is it significant? Dealing with everything from did aliens paint these things to people who've done the reading and have really engaged the material and really understand hunter-gatherer rock art. So it's quite a wide range, and that's what you're dealing with. It's real people from the public who come to these weekends, and they're varying levels of commitment. So some people are really there for almost every trip, and other people come for one trip a year or maybe 2 trips a year. So it's quite a wide spread. So you've got to be quite flexible. And I think what has worked over the years is the eCRAG contingent of the members of the Archaeological Society, particularly in the Western Cape branch, because we are just surveying in that area, have remained loyal members of ArchSoc. So the Western Cape branch currently has 163 members of ArchSoc, and 75 of those members are eCRAG or ex-eCRAG members. So almost half of the membership of the Archaeological Society in the Western Cape have been part of eCRAG, and it's a great way to form bonds because there's lots of one-on-one time over a weekend. You form deep friendships, you go through rivers and bushes and all sorts of things of adversity that you have to overcome. And there's a fun element is always there. And I think that's what keeps people coming back, is those friendships that have formed strong bonds. What hasn't worked so well is the level of technical ability. So the non-archaeologists have really struggled with all the nomenclature, the classification, what's an eland, what's an elephant, how do you describe a rock art site? And that remains to be quite a challenging aspect of the process. So, and also the boring part, no one wants to come for a weekend away and be that person sitting on the app, recording the sites in detail, going back after the field weekend and being the responsible for ensuring the maps are correct or the photos are correctly uploaded and so on. So the archaeologists have largely carried that load, but we're looking forward and trying to see how can we bring the technical level down as much as possible to make this as easy as possible for people. So how does eCRAG work? So prior to each survey, we meet once a year. We plan all the trips for the year in advance. So we have an annual calendar. We meet normally in Hermanus, Jeanette's house down there, and we plan our trips for the year. We've got better and better at getting more and more advance notice because accommodation bookings and so on. So we try and streamline the process because we are all doing this on the side. It's a volunteer effort. Nobody's doing this full-time or being paid to do it. Then once we've got areas that we're focusing on, we go back to the database. We go back to the SAHRIS database and the GIS system, which is QGIS that we use, which has all the sites live streaming into the mapping system, all for free. And we know where we want to focus our areas, and we know what has to be done and where are the gaps. And then we focus our surveys on those areas. So this is a technical part of it, but we don't think that this would be necessarily something a non-archaeologist would have to do anyway. So there's guidance and vision and direction given by the archaeologists to ensure that these records are at a high standard. The old paper-based forms, we used to use these up to 2012, and then they were replaced and they were typed up into the old Access database. And they were then replaced by 2 versions of the apps that we wrote for the recording process, which directly pull into the national system in South Africa. So the SAHRIS system absorbs this information. We used to use ODK or Open Data Kit, which was Android only from about 2012 to 2023. And since the new version of SAHRIS was released in October 2023, we've been using KoboForms, which is a fork of the ODK suite. So they're actually compatible with each other, but the KoboForms works on an iPhone as well. So it doesn't matter which device. You could use a tablet, you can use any mobile phone device, and they work offline in the field. And they're very easy to configure. So depending on where you are working, you can create custom forms that just suits your project, as long as the basic data that you are uploading is compatible with the national system. So in other countries here, if you had a national system such as SAHRIS, you would do something similar to what we're doing. Okay, and that's just a screenshot showing you the version 1 of SAHRIS that we used to use. And this is a current version that's more mobile friendly, much more lightweight, a lot faster than the old version of SAHRIS. It's web-based, so it's in the cloud, and SARA pays for all the hosting fees and the management of the system. So it's completely free. We can upload unlimited images, unlimited records, because it fits in with their national mandate of managing the national inventory in South Africa. They are getting to show their results to the public by us doing the work that we're doing through eCRAG. So our statistics are annually recorded in their performance plans, for instance. So the beauty of this is the system costs about 2,000 Rand a month to host nationally. So the whole system doesn't cost a lot of money, and it makes it very sustainable because it's using free software. And that's showing a map of an area that we surveyed. We document this for each trip so we know that we've covered an area and we don't need to go back there. So how does the data look like on eCRAG? We post-process all the images. We also use dstretch live on site. All of you are using dstretch. I don't need to go through dstretch, but we process all the images using dstretch as well, using the batch mode. And then those photographs are uploaded along with the original photographs from the site recording. We also reconcile sites with older recordings. So Heimer Binowitz's records, for instance, from the 1950s and 60s, if there's a site that was recorded by their team, we go back to that, re-record it, update the GPS, update the photographs, and so on. And this is a site view of one of their sites. And this is a photograph from the 1956, not changed at all. So you can see the recent photograph and then the dstretch version. There's been zero deterioration to that particular image. And then Lily kindly put a little dstretch animated GIF for us, showing how effective the tool is for us. So the new things going forward, and then I'm going to hand over to Lily and to Gemma. So we're very fortunate that Aussie Eureka is a Turkish travel agent contacted us at the farm that we started our eCRAG surveys, called Bakrans. And he had this idea to have some of the archaeologists involved in eCRAG to give some tours to some of his guests. So we said, yeah, sure, we do this for free all the time and no problem. And the next thing, I was in a helicopter flying over to the sites in the Cederberg with some guests who just donated 50,000 Rand to eCRAG. So just, okay, this is a good deal. And then recently we had other guests who donated 100,000 Rand to eCRAG for us. So these are the two donations which now pay for the UCT students to come to eCRAG trips. And so there's a little asterisk on the funding. We don't actively look for funding, but we did receive some funding, and we are spending that on bringing students in. And yeah, two examples right here. And then I'm going to hand it over to Lily, because we are now improving our research outputs, and she's going to give you a little example of her involvement in eCRAG and how that's helped her project.
Yes, so my honours project, I looked at paintings of bags in the Western Cape, and I was put in contact with Nick, who kindly gave me all of the sites in the Western Cape that had the keyword bag flagged in the system. So with that, I was then able to get an idea of where all of these sites were that have had bags recorded, which made it easier for me, for one, because I didn't have to go out and find all of these sites with bags myself. And yeah, it was just a good way of filtering the data set so that I could use it for my own project. So the fact that we had this system and all of this information already recorded has been beneficial for research, especially for students. And I'm sure it's going to help, especially more over the years. I think I'm one of the first people at UCT, that is, to have used this SAHRIS database, and especially with eCRAG's recordings that have been included into this database. And yeah, I think with my honours project, it was also interesting to note that I could pick up some discrepancies with the recording. So with my project, I was able to categorize all the bags, get a general idea. But what was interesting was that going to some sites that had bags recorded in them, they had that keyword, I could go there, but then I would realize that maybe there wasn't a painting of bag there. Or the case where it was the opposite, where I would go into a site and there would be bags, but they weren't on the system or in the inventory. So it's interesting, because I think that also speaks to the recording and using of keywords. So what the eCRAG recorders use with the recording. And that highlights just the need for consistent and standardized descriptors, like I mentioned. And it also just shows that maybe in the past that the bags may have been misidentified or perhaps overlooked at certain sites, which is not an issue. It's just also showing that where my research recently has added and contributed to this system. And yes, so I started joining on eCRAG trips last year, beginning of last year, with Gemma as well. And I would just like to say that the participation in eCRAG and the trips have been very, very beneficial, especially as a young researcher or postgrad student, because it has just exposed me to all of these sites and exposed me to new geological and environmental regions, which has essentially broadened my comparative knowledge of rock art styles and their possible regional variability. So it has been great, and eCRAG has been there for, upcoming researchers, and I think it's just very beneficial and definitely to be used by further or other researchers as well, and upcoming postgrad students. Yeah, over to Gemma.
Hi everyone. Okay. So while I am a regular eCRAGger, I also wear the other hat of taking over the social media for the Archaeological Society of South Africa. And talking about using digital tools to represent rock art, we are sort of analyzing how report backs of our eCRAG trips are sort of received by audiences who follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And while the rock art trips only make up about 20% of the content that we're putting out, they also make up around 30% of the interactions that we're getting on the platform. So there seems to be a sort of disproportionate interest in seeing the rock art recording trips that eCRAG is going on. And what we've noticed is that it's not so much about audiences actually viewing the art or the imagery that we're posting, but they are equally interested in seeing the people at work, seeing the people in the field, using the different apps in the different landscapes. And we often are getting comments from audiences saying, gee, feels like I am there, so proud of the work that you're all doing. And they are also interested in D-Stretch as a recording app that we use. That's not something that's publicly really well known about. So it's really cool to be able to use social media as a platform to sort of communicate all of that information.
Yeah.
Is there any questions or comments in the audience? Yep.
Hi, Nick, Lily and Gemma. Thanks so much for that. It's an absolute inspiration and really great applause to you guys for what you're doing for rock art research, management and conservation. I'm quite interested in the actual recording. Do you find that it's mostly one of you, the archaeologist, who's doing the actual recording? And when you get back after the site, are you the ones who are checking the recording and then uploading the information?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely the post recording is all the archaeologists. I think people have already cracked their beers and bottles of wine by, literally as you walk in the door after the day of surveying. So that load is falling on us, but because there's a lot of automation with SAHRIS, that process has become very short. So it's about 20 minutes of work after a trip to check the data and upload it, and then uploading the photographs. Depending on your internet connection, that can vary, but if you've got a very strong internet connection, that can go quite quickly. But in the field, it varies. So there have been a couple of the, let's call them the core non-archaeologists who come to most of the trips, and about 3 or 4 of them have managed to record on their own. But it's still a low number, 3 out of 75 people. And it's because of the technical nature of the recording process. And so we are streamlined, shorter recording form, particularly with 2 projects that we are going to remote handhold in the Grootvadersbosch and Classroom this coming year. So we're going to go out, train people there in the area, and they are going to record themselves, and we are going to moderate that information on SAHRIS later on. So we're looking at a very, very short recording form, which has got photographs, GPS, and basic descriptors, and then that detailed classification will happen at a desktop level later on. That is the catch, the archaeologists want that detailed information, that structure, and then to non-members that it's a big barrier to entry to understand what on earth we are talking about and why we're focusing on those motifs.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I'm always inspired by the work you do, but just a question, how helpful are the volunteers? I mean, I know for them it's fun, it's building friendships, but if say the 3 of you went out just by yourselves, would it actually be easier, less logistical things, and you're getting the same information? Or are the members who are coming actually adding to your work?
Thanks, Garen. And that's a great question. I think that if the goal of eCRAG was purely recordings, then sure, more lightweight, to people who are just archaeologists going out surveying, you get a lot more done. But we've been talking a lot about communities this whole week. eCRAG is a community. It's not living in a local area going off to sites. It's a community of people that have a level of affluence to get into a car to drive to the Cederberg, and to set aside weekends of their time for the long term to go out and record. And so through eCRAG, we are disseminating and promoting knowledge about archaeology and the magnificence of archaeology every single weekend. And so each person that's involved with eCRAG talks to other people. So it's hard to measure how big that influence is, but I think that's really the importance of it, and that's what's kept it going. I think that if it was just a recording of a couple of archaeologists, we would have probably stopped at some point with a particular area, and then moved on to something else, how it goes. So with eCRAG, because it's all those volunteers, that's what's given it longevity. And I think the other factor is there are a lot of other aspects to a weekend that aren't just about rock art surveying, organizing the accommodation, organizing, transport and all of that. The logistics of it largely falls on the non-archaeologists in the group. So, there is a quid pro quo in this. So, and I don't know, it keeps us inspired to see people coming through and, younger members coming through eCRAG now, who will take over from us as well. So, that's, it's not just about the sites and the stats, probably the worst slide to leave in the end there, although we're very proud of being the biggest group.
Just to follow on from that, in the field, I think what Nick's been doing is also playing to everyone's strengths. So what you've been doing now is, having like a Klipspringer group where you have all these people who are a bit faster and not so interested in just sitting down and looking at the paintings and recording them. They actually want to go out and find them. So they want to run around the bush and then go find the sites and then say, hey, we found a site, we found a site. So I think that also helps because you have more of a balance. And if, you have those people who are a bit agitated and don't want to sit, rather have them go out and find the sites, which is what they want to do. And then, the people who are a bit more chilled and want to sit in the shade and record and look. I think just playing into those strengths as well is very important, because otherwise it can cause like tension in the day, which is, you don't want that ever with rock art recording.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. It's always nice to hear about eCRAG. And I feel very jealous not going on them because I'm so far away in Kimberley. But yeah, hopefully soon. I got two questions. One question, do you track your individual surveyors? Because I saw that you just did like a block that this section has been surveyed. I mean, because like with Gilrain's comment of, someone might not actually maybe knew or doesn't know how to see rock art, or maybe D-Stretch doesn't have D-Stretch, so they might pass a rock art site. How do you see that you missed, by tracking someone, you can see, oh, okay, they actually didn't go in there, we need to go back. That's the first question. The second question is, how is your data being fed into SAHRIS, but also trying to critique SAHRIS kind of categories, especially like with this conference, we're talking about what is a site, what are categories of sites, because I think they've got things like tradition, it might be even biased towards the Western Cape, those kind of things. Are you questioning, are you helping build SAHRIS, or
so the first question, so we've started using GPS tracker, and there are other ones for the iPhone where it tracks your track logs, and then we've asked members to give those to us at the end of the day, which then gives us the footprint of the area surveyed. And then we aggregate the area that we've covered, and we're very familiar with the area we've surveyed. So we have a high degree of confidence that most sites have been recorded. As you know, there's always something that gets missed, and we don't pretend that, it's everything every time. There are always sites that you can miss. But we do try and saturate the area in the surveys. We do track where people do move around. So we those polygons that I've drawn are based on where people have actually surveyed. But there is a level of, but we pair people up with someone we know is very confident and generally very good at finding sites. And then the second question is, yes, I did happen to build SAHRIS, so it is biased towards the Western Cape archives. So the forms, the structure comes from UCT, Jeanette Deacon, Royden, etc., etc., etc. So it does bias that way. And I think in the detail, that's like a shell. I think there's core information that's more limited, that is more global. Where is it? Photographs, there's rock art here. Then the finer details of what is a site, where do you draw the line? This boulder, their paintings, and then the next boulder next to it, do you one site or do you make those two or whatever it is? So we generally err on the side of less. So we would generally include more paintings if they're very close to each other as a site, rather than just creating lots of sites for numbers' sake. So we try to go less than the other way around. So that's a technical thing, but I think from a purely archival point of view, the fact that there's a point there's something there are photographs. If you're a researcher interested in just bags, it gives you an entry point to take things further. So we don't pretend, that it covers every single particular question that you could have. And I don't think any system like this should. I think it should stop at a point, because it would be too exhaustive, too impossible to upload every single field. You'd end up with something very unwieldy if you went that way. So we think it's fairly good, but I think there's certain critiques that we could strip down things, on there as well. So yeah, it's not without criticism and valid criticism.